This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom on how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm your host, integrative intuitive medium Kara Lovehart. And today's podcast title is You Aren't What You Eat After All. So we've often heard the phrase, you are what you eat. But with today's guest, we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about the connection between our nutrient absorption, our daily function, and performance. And our guest today is Nutritionist Amy Fox, and she is on a mission to educate everyone about how food choices affect our health and happiness. Amy holds a Master's of Science in Food and Nutrition Sciences from Ohio University and is a certified functional food professional. She's the principal consultant with TiER1 Performance Solutions and the founder of the Food and Mood Lab. So let's get into this episode and learn a little bit about Amy, as well as our topic of you aren't what you eat after all. All right, Miss Amy, I want to know a little bit about what you're passionate about right now in this line of work and how you got to be doing this amazing work right now.
I've always had an interest in health and fitness, and it started at a young age when I was in high school. But the irony is, when I was a freshman in high school, I hated anything to do with health, fitness. In fact, I almost got kicked out of school. I I just refused to go to gym class, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And they told me if I didn't go the next class, I would be kicked out. So I entered this just arena with an interesting in an interesting way. But as I just continued to get more active and start just getting more curiosity about what I'm eating, I just started to feel good. And I mean, when you're 14, 15, 16, I just remember that I just started to feel different, and I had more energy, and it just really launched this whole path of just experimenting and being curious, and that continued. I um, ran some marathons, and just it was just a way of life. And I was also influenced by my mom, who had type 1 diabetes. She passed away a few years ago, and she just always nutrition and how she should use food to help her manage diabetes was always confusing. No matter if she went to a nutritionist or her doctor, she just never really got it. And that frustrated me for her because I saw her suffer. And that definitely was always in the background. How can I help my mom? And so a few years ago, I decided to formalize this hobby, and I got my master's in food and science. I became a certified functional food specialist. And I definitely knew this was my lane because it truly, like, I feel energy when I am learning, when I'm sharing. And so I decided to launch my passion project, the Food and Mood Lab, less than a year ago. And my mission is really to educate people with and help to really break through the noise of what how should I eat to feel good. And I just remember I was experimenting a little bit with, hey, is there an interest in this for people? Would people be interested in learning or kind of coming along with me in this food and mood lab? And I started a private group. I put a message out there, and I remember just I was at a time where I just wasn't feeling good. I think I had had like a season of not eating well or what have you, and I just talked about that. I just talked about how I just didn't feel good, like, mentally. And I remember just feeling like a gray cloud was over my head and feeling overwhelmed by the information and just a little lost. But I knew I needed to start with how I'm taking care of myself from a nutritional perspective. And the response was overwhelming. I mean, and it made me sad. People have a need to just have real people provide real talk about this stuff and break it down so they can feel better. So that's really what led me down this path.
Yeah, so one, I think it's really beautiful, the way that you really stepped into your passion and is being vulnerable And I find that as a leader, as someone who's in a position of education or helping other people to find that motivation, leading from a space of vulnerability and sharing this is what I went through makes it so much more accessible. I think that there is this disconnect between the nutrition realm, nutritionist, someone who's a nutritional counselor, and whatever the label is, that realm of food is so overwhelming for people in our culture because it feels like it's unattainable. Well, and there's a perception of comparison of, well, they must be super happy, organic, gluten-free, dairy-free, all the things they believe and perceive as the healthy way. And I'll never be able to get there. I'll never be able to attain that. So I love that you're making it more available and connecting on that level. And you've been through it too. So you're especially watching your mom struggle, because I think that's really something that the overwhelm of the information, how do we find what works for us? So I think it's definitely a big thing. So the phrase "you are what you eat" is something that we pass along. I've heard it from my mom. I think that people have probably heard that phrase. I'd love to hear your perspective on that statement.
Yeah, I actually use that in the first line of describing the Food and Mood Lab. I really wholeheartedly believe how you choose to feel your body directly impacts how you show up in all aspects of your life. I absolutely believe that. I mean, if you're eating foods that aren't healthy, you won't feel as good, and that will start to trickle down into your attitudes, to your confidence, to your beliefs, to your energy, and all of the people around you experience you when you're like that. So I absolutely do believe that you are what you eat. The scientist and the nutritionist in me also knows that it isn't as simple as that. I think it's and trust me, like I think if we could get the majority of Americans just ditching just ditching processed foods or bagged foods or what have you, and just eating healthy, I mean, that would be a huge win. But as you start to unpack and kind of like really look at some of the layers of that, it really is only half of the story, because it's all about what your body can absorb and making sure that you are really maximizing the goodness that you're putting into your body.
Tell us a little bit more about the absorption and how it affects our health. Like, what is it something that's common?
It is very common. I mean, more than 90% of Americans are deficient in some sort of vitamin or mineral. So it's definitely an issue for, and uh, whether you're rich, you're poor, or whatever, whoever you are, it affects all people across the board. There's a difference, though. I think it's important to listeners to understand the difference between a nutritional deficiency, when you're maybe lacking certain vitamins or minerals, or a macronutrient or a micronutrient, versus malabsorption, because malabsorption is actually a disorder or a condition of the small intestine, and it really means there's some underlying medical conditions that might be presenting as a nutritional deficiency. And so with nutritional deficiency, it shows up, and this is I think why it's so difficult. It shows up with symptoms that sometimes we can just confuse for just life of being tired. Um, but if you start to see things like you feel like you've got an irregular heartbeat, or hair loss, brittle nails, poor digestive health, muscle cramps, and that becomes a common pattern or something that happens regularly, definitely it's worth a conversation with your doctor. And it's just good practice. And after a certain age, you need to make sure you're getting those annuals and have your blood work run. It's a great way to medically spot if there actually is a deficiency. Malabsorption is going to show up with weight loss, anemia. And again, you're typically sometimes seeing that with people who unfortunately have to deal with irritable bowel syndrome or celiac disease, or things like that.
I feel like IBS and issues with gut health are so common, and so common that people are not aware that they have it or that there's any issue with their digestion. So I'm curious, if there is something going on there, that you're saying that potentially they'll have issues with absorption, and that can affect and bring on other symptoms, that they are maybe again using an over-the-counter pain reliever or something, that they're thinking this is just something I'm gonna to get rid of here with this, and it's maybe a nutritional deficiency because of their absorption issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have bouts of diarrhea or bloating or gas right after you eat, that isn't normal all the time. I mean, every once in a while, they eat too much roughage or what have you, maybe. But if that becomes a consistent pattern or shooting pains, I mean, all of that isn't normal. Or the stool just looks funny, smells funny. It's kind of gross to think about, but they're definitely signs. So you need to be alert to those signs. But there's as time goes on and we get older, aging does start to affect nutritional deficiency, chronic inflammation. So if you're eating a poor diet, will start to do that. So some common everyday life things, stress, whether or not you're hydrated or you're overhydrated. So some of those things all can play a role in nutrient deficiency.
I love, Amy, that you said about that not being normal. Because what I think a lot of the things that we consider to be normal in the world, like it's normal to be tired, it's normal to have headaches and migraines, it's normal to have pain, it's normal to have issues with sleep. I feel like the world that we're living in, a lot of these symptoms that our culture's experiencing have been just so common, and that people talk to their friends about, oh, I have my Crohn's, or my, whatever the issue is, that is a disease or something their symptoms are dealing with. It's something that almost there's giving up the power to change or to look anywhere else, or maybe even the awareness that there is something that is not normal about those symptoms. Isn't that interesting? So we say here on the podcast that, all the information that we spread and we share for bringing amazing guests like you on is to share that these things are not normal, and that it is radical in most people's perspective at this time, at least this time in our history of our culture. It's radical to live and to eat this way, or, in a healthy way, or treat our bodies better. So I just thought it was really interesting you said that it's not normal, because again, that kind of goes along what we talk about a lot here, that how do we bring in the new normal of it's normal to feel well, and information you're sharing helps us get there.
Well, can we riff on this
Yeah,
for a minute?
yeah.
Because you're striking a chord with me. Because this is the year that I turned 50, and so I just feel like that is definitely a reason why I'm really starting to pay attention to certain things in my lifestyle and how it may help me to live longer or and live. And I don't. By the way, I don't want to just live long. I want to be. I'm an endurance athlete. I I like to be I like to feel like I'm strong, like I'm a strong woman and like do hard things. I love that. And so that's what I want to be doing when I'm 70. We love to ski, my children, my family, we love to be active. And so, but one of the things that's a hot topic for me that I used to think is normal, that I'm really trying to uh, put a huge spotlight on for me personally, is stress. I think that we all, and I think there are a lot of people who just assume that living in a stressful life day in and day out, that is the norm. And for all sorts of reasons, whether it's because it's work or economy, I mean, there's so many things. But it isn't normal to have to chronic stress has a direct impact on your health condition. And I mean, I'm a walking example of that because I've had some markers come back that the only lever that I have is literally stress. And so I used to think, because success to me and feeling good a lot of times comes with being productive. I just that's my personality, and I love to be busy, and so it just got away from me, and I really sometimes feel like taking time out of a day to be mindful or to heck do a 10 or 15-minute meditation or the walk outside. I feel a little guilty about that. But what I've found is that I am never who no one's ever perfect with this stuff. But the more I commit to that, most importantly and first and my foremost to me, I'm actually a better mom. I don't have as much my nerves aren't fried at the end of the day. So a priority for me is keeping my house peaceful and being a place for everybody to relax, and not taking breaks like that was just turning me into just a stress ball, and it wasn't coming through. I wasn't showing up for my family. And so it stress, like the science behind that, absolutely it can lead to some medical conditions. And so I used to just think that it was normal to never get up from behind a desk. Like leaving for lunch or taking a break, that to me was just wasted time. And I've really flipped my thinking because of all the reasons that I shared with you. But yeah, I just like that's a hot topic for me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so I'm a big science geek. I love science stuff, but I'm also a psychic medium, so I have both of these perspectives on the world, and and also learning and understanding how people's energy fields work and how stress affects that, and see it changes their aura, it changes their energy, it changes the nervous system flow to their organs and the function. And so I see it very clearly, and then I see the science of it and go put these things together. I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. So nervous system health is like foundational, especially for someone like me. A lot of our listeners out there they consider themselves high achievers. They're people that they push themselves a little bit more, and they're also people that might consider themselves higher intuitive or highly empathic people. So we're even more more likely to be influenced by stress in a bigger way. So I think that that is so foundational before, I don't want to say before the food, but food is and absorption is affected by stress. But I just think that that's something that is so key to look at and to be aware of. And getting out of the program of we have to we're a commodity that we have to create and produce and be productive to be enough. And that enoughness is what, when I see people who have that, it's a program. There's a lot of excess yellow in the energy field, and what that affects is the nervous system, and it affects the digestive system. So we're over processing and over digesting mental information, and that affects the body's ability to down regulate, move into parasympathetic mode, and then digest the food. So I just think that's so, like, it's on par with what we're kind of talking about here. But I'd love to hear more about the absorption, and you being a performance athlete. How does absorption affect performance? And that's something I'm really curious about.
So I think from a performance standpoint, I think of energy and I think of your ability to have like feel strong, have energy. And when you don't have the proper nutrients and you're dealing with a deficiency, you're showing up less than. I mean, you won't have if you do have the energy, if you, excuse me, if you are trying to show up like me as an athlete trying to push through it, you can cause injury. You can, it can turn up in a way where your ability to perform in the workplace, you are not clear minded. It's clouded, that brain fog. So it's really to me about energy when I think of performance, and not having the right nutrients just makes you feel like crap. And not to mention, I mean, not women especially having low iron and low calcium is a very common thing, and both of those can make you feel tired. But also calcium in particular, as we know, like could lead to a weakening of your bones and osteoporosis, which is this trickle down effect of so many risks of just falling. You hurt yourself as you get older, just increases the risk of falling, of disease. So that's how I think of it. And you know, if your listeners were to do a Google search on nutrient absorption, it is confusing. There's so many vitamins. There's water soluble, there's fat soluble, there's I mean it is super confusing, but I like to keep everything that I share super simple unless somebody wants to go go a deeper level. But if you're if you're wondering like, "Oh man, how do I increase my nutrient absorption?" That might be me. One of the things that you want to make sure you're doing is eating a whole food diet. Like make sure that, and some people are even confused about that. So I just try to say anything that's got the fewest ingredients, and try to eat things that are not boxed or bagged. So just more foods that are whole, that don't have a list of ingredients. It might be whole grains, it could be fruit, like lots of fruits and vegetables, lean protein. So a whole food diet, like that's the best place to start, because what we know is that a diet that's like a Western diet, meaning fast food, highly processed, baked pastries, all of that leads to inflammation, and chronic inflammation can absolutely affect your ability to absorb nutrients. So we start with just making sure you're like, let's start with cleaning up your diet. And that can be overwhelming for people. So one thing that you can change, flip If it's a snack that you're having a soda and chips, like let's start with like one choice where we start where we can be 1% better. So start there, and then it's about eating a variety of foods. So eating foods that of fruits and vegetables of variety color, and even the variety in how you prepare them. So a combination of cooked versus raw. If you're doing those two things, you're likely covering all of your bases. If you want to up level and just again increase your odds or take it up a level, think about buying local. It isn't just about supporting your community. Yes, that's it. And about the flavor and all of that. But when you buy your local, just know when you harvest vegetables in about 70, within 72 hours, 15 to 60% of the nutrients degrade. So you're losing nutrients within a couple days of picking or harvesting your fruits and vegetables. So buying local, you're not in transport. Those vegetables are not in transport, which has to happen with a grocery store. So try to buy local, and then think about storing your fruits and vegetables in the refrigerator, because any additional light or heat will also degrade them. So those are like the more geeky stuff. And then there's a lot of other things too that we could do. But if we start there, chances are you're covering most of your bases.
Yeah, I think that simple is really important. So I live in a town that we're the snack food capital of the world. Technically, York, Pennsylvania is. If you look it up, what's the snack food capital of the United States? It's York, Pennsylvania. So when I was pregnant with my son, I worked third shift at a gas station, and everything was junk food, fast food, and that's how I ate. Now I wasn't always like that. We have our farmers. Farmers are in my family, so we grew up eating off the land. But there was a certain part of my life then that I was eating not naturally, eating that way. I gained so much weight. I was 260 pounds at the most, very unhealthy. It leads to all the mood issues and all the things. And it was a point where I started to, how do I start eating better? And it had to start with one thing at a time, because I, was still a perfectionist then. And I was like, I want to be perfect. I want to do it all right. And then it would just, it can't be sustainable with making all the changes at once. But one of the things that was more challenging, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this, because when you are in a space where you're overweight and you're really low energy and your mood's affected, perceiving someone else that's a nutritionist or in this area that like is super healthy, we have this comparison thing we do that can sometimes block us in general from even starting. But then what's really interesting is if you live around people or have people in your community or in your life that aren't eating a certain way or eating healthy, it can kind of bring this space of, oh, well, you're a snob that you have to eat this way, or what do you have to eat local? There's an interesting thing I find that is just false. It's just other people afraid of change, afraid of something that's different than they're judging themselves or judging you. I think that's something I'd be curious if you have any pieces of wisdom, because from what you shared, your journey into stepping into your passion was being vulnerable and sharing. But did you get any pushback? Because I feel like a lot of our listeners, when they start making these changes, they get a lot of pushback from themselves or this struggle, feeling like they aren't going to be able to meet some sort of ideal nutritional way to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's you bring up just a lot of really important topics, and I think everybody you can be as confident as the person that represents like the ultimate confidence and success. The minute you open up social media, I think everybody falls victim to this. That voice in your head, it can creep in. Like, I want to look like that. I literally just had this conversation with my son last night. I'm like, accept who you are. Stop, get off your TikTok. And like, you're beautiful. You're great. But I mean, everyone, not just young people. I think the most successful people deal with that. It's just the nature of the content and the people and what we're exposing ourselves to. So it happens. And I think that we need to be talking about it more, because I think people who aren't connected to a community, a person or a community that can relate, that they trust, I think sometimes they're trying to connect through social media and you can feel isolated. So I think finding someone who is that person again in any way, I think is really important. Um, but so that comparison syndrome is real for everyone. And I'm always reminded when I talk to people who are interested in doing their own thing, and as an entrepreneur, I'm just sharing my story. I'm always reminded. Someone once told me because I like there's so many people trying to do this thing. We talk about nutrition and wellness, but everybody has their own point of view. Everyone has their own unique story, and your story and you are what make it different. But to the person who might be feeling like they I don't know, may not know where to turn or like it's overwhelming and they're not sure or they're feeling like they're getting some pushback, like you say. I mean, I think it's all about making sure, and it sounds a little woo woo, but really making sure you have a why that is meaningful. I mean, looking good is flighty. It's not going to last. And I don't mind being vulnerable here, but because I like the whole stress topic when I tell you that I have to be committed to it, for me, it was always this thing out there that it really wasn't my why to just, oh, it'll help me to live longer. It'll help me. Like it was that wasn't really meaningful. But the fact that I have three boys in high school and they're going to be leaving the home, one's leaving the home in the summer to go to college, and this runway is so short. I do not want to I want to create experiences where I am showing up as with a peaceful home and in a way that helps me to build a relationship. And so I finally got my why. And so I just encourage people to really think about like, why is it? Like, and then keep asking yourself three times. If you think it's one reason, then ask yourself one more time. So really getting at the why. And one more thing that I tell people all the time, I'm like, you can really get wrapped up in how to start or goal setting or what to do. My approach that I suggest that I know works for me and the people that I've worked with is a process that it's a goal setting process that is a like tried and true. If I'm ever off track or I need a restart or someone feels completely stuck, I have them think about three in the very beginning, three tasks, three areas that they want to change related to mindset, activity, and nutrition. It happens to stand for man. I mean, I love men, but right, but yeah, it's man. But I think about that as, but when you're developing those goals, like a behavior, something you want to do to feel better on a daily basis, my whole approach is create these behaviors or these tasks completely achievable. Like, not a stretch goal. You know for sure it is easy, small, and attainable. And it sounds counterproductive or counterintuitive, but for someone who just needs to to make change happen, when you develop a streak of that, you get one day and you get 2 days, you get 3 days. That's when we start to see momentum and this hope. I can do this and I can do more. And I think when we're dealing with change from a place of hope and not a place of just of the opposite of just beating yourself up, of shame, of guilt, that is where the magic is. That is really where you see people start to make lasting change and meaningful change. But it all comes from where we're starting from and giving yourself grace and thinking about a system that makes it really easy for you, nobody else. But what is it for you? What are the three small things you can do? And it doesn't even need to align to the mindset, activity, nutrition, but three things you want to commit to and that you can do. I think people have to start there, but a lot of times people just want to go all in. They see something on the internet, they're looking for the quick fix, or they from a burst of motivation and they go for it, and then it doesn't stick, and people get stuck in this shame game, the guilt blame type of cycle, and sadly, like, people get stuck there for days, weeks, months, even years. And so that's a sensitive topic for me because I see that happening a lot, and it starts to bleed in, like I originally shared with you, it bleeds into all aspects of your life. So I had a woman share with me that she didn't, it created this distance between her and her husband because she just didn't feel comfortable in her own skin, didn't feel comfortable being intimate, the date nights. She didn't want to get dressed up. And like, it sounds like, oh, you couldn't stick with the diet, or it's not about that at all. It's about how do you feel? And that, and really not addressing that, can really have some major implications on, again, all aspects of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have an episode. It's called the self-sabotage detox, and I encourage people to go back and listen to that, because I think before you embark on any goal, anything, financial, health, relationship goals, anything, I think we need to be taught skills to overcome that part of ourselves that sabotages, that compares, that the mindset piece. But there's so many other layers to that, to self-sabotage. And I think when people are, if you're listening out there, from what Amy's saying, that I love that you're sharing that it's not something that people are alone in. It's very common. But I think that that's one of the things, as a health coach or nutrition wellness coach in general, that's one of the biggest things we work with, because how do we get you to the next level, right? How do you get them to then work deeper in a functional level, or getting blood work, or staying consistent with something? I think that's the biggest key there. So if you were going to give us one thing that you would advise each of us to do when it comes to food choices, just to kind of finalize here, what would that be?
I would want to encourage people that, one meal can make a difference. So just that, thinking about that next choice being a good choice, and just thinking of food like medicine. But I think if you're going to be thinking about that, it's how can I be healthy in that next meal, and not try to think about it as this big long-term hairy goal, but just smart choices, just one healthy choice at a time. And just the small choices add up. I mean, it really, really adds up. I mean, I always try to come back. I have a friend who was encouraging me to stretch more, because that just seems like pointless, right? Because I'm not productive. That's not productive type of work. But I look at it now, he relates everything to brushing your teeth. And I think this is a great analogy too. Like when you brush your teeth, you might have some like immediate benefit, like a fresh breath, but the more consistent you are, like the better, like, oral health you have. You don't have cavities. That's not happening because you brush your teeth one night. It's about this consistent pattern. So thinking like just those small choices, what's the next healthy choice I can make? And there are ways to simplify it. And so start with ditching the bag, throwing out anything that, I know that your town is a snack capital. But I bet you there's ways to other healthy ways we can think of, healthy snacks there.
Yeah, yeah. The way I live and eat is very radical, and from the culture I live in. But I love it. On some level, I love it, because then I can, share, and then people. It doesn't always taste horrible. Like there's this weird perspective about that, and eating healthy tastes delicious. It's good. So I have two more questions for you. What is your favorite product, wellness topic, or self care indulgence at this time?
So there are two things that come to mind. One is a product that I'm just loving. It's a product. Well, the whole company is called Chroma Wellness, and they are a newer company on the scene. But their products are like, first of all, they're beautiful to look at. And like, for example, I'm drinking this beauty matcha latte. It's a wellness company, but I fell in love with a few products that are really helping me. And I've struggled with getting good quality sleep. And so I've tried everything, but I tried this drink that they have. It's Calm and Restore, and it's a magnesium drink, but it's got some added wonderful goodies in there that help with. It's got some prebiotics, and it tastes great. So that's been part of my routine for almost the past year, and I feel great. I mean, I feel good as I'm like just calming into or kind of decompressing. I drink it early, enough where I don't have to worry about getting up after drinking something. So that's just a product that and they have these wonderful other products. There's this product called OMG cookie butter.
Oh, that
It's
sounds
actually healthy
amazing.
for you.
That sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, it's so good. So and um, I'm big on trying. I love to try different things. So that's been the product that I've been thinking about. And along the lines of what I shared about stress. So my wellness habit is I try to meditate at least once a day.
Yeah.
And I really try to keep that simple too, even if it's a timer for 3 minutes. I schedule it, just take a couple deep breaths. I try to think in the present, and it grounds me.
Yeah.
And there are times that I have time for more, but at a minimum. And that's really just been a strategy that's helped me. And the best way I describe it to people, I'm like, I just feel like at the end of the day, if I am strategic about it and then when I go out for the mail or I take a lunch break, I tack on 5 minutes. What I find is I have this gas tank of this reservoir at the end of the day. I just have a little bit more or less. Like I have an extra minute to pause before I react.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's been a wonderful thing. So I try to stick with it. I'm not perfect, but I try to find that to be part of my routine every day.
Wonderful. Last question, Miss Amy. If you could detox one thing in your life or the world right now, what would that be?
Phone,
Yeah.
hands down. I tell my kids that all the time, and then I
Yeah.
find myself being drawn to it. Sort of the nature of, food and mood. It's out there, but you have to put the guardrails up, and I'm getting to be more vigilant. But I used to think it was an hour before bedtime, and now I just shut down at several hours. I show up more engaged with my family. I get to just be present and be 100% involved in whatever it is, even if it is a TV show but this whole, like, the phone promotes multitasking for me. And then my brain just it feels even more overwhelmed. So I'm trying to be really good about that. More time before I shut down completely at night, and then especially in the morning. So I don't grab the phone, at least for the first hour. So I'm trying to be even more vigilant about that because I feel the benefits, and I gotta walk the walk. That's what I
Yeah.
tell my kids. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how can we learn more about you? We're going to put information about you, of course, in the show notes, but is there anything else you want to share with our listeners? Anything about you or how to connect with you or anything you have to offer?
wow. I'm always open to ideas from people on what topics. So I love to hear from any of your listeners on topics that you might want to address or I may want to address. But to find me, it's foodandmoodlab.com, and there's a nice little presence on Facebook. So it's Food and Mood Lab there as well. And so there's just some good engagements. I'm here in the kitchen with you because I feel like I can't talk about this stuff without being in the kitchen. But I try to, create some recipes, share other people's recipes. So hopefully it's going to become a good hub for real, like, information, and just a community where people feel like they can ask questions and share information. So I would love for people to check it out.
Thank you. Wonderful. I'll share more information about that. Thank you so much for coming on, Miss Amy. We appreciate
Yes,
it.
you bet.
And again, we're very grateful you're here. And thank you all of you for listening. And be well until next time, my friends.